Hi, this is Tim Wendel, and I'd like to talk a little bit today about varying our sentence length, how just changing things up line by line can really help keep the reader engaged. And we're going to look at one paragraph, just one, from Joan Didion, who does this very, very well, both in her nonfiction and her fiction. Here's the paragraph. This is the opening from Some Dreamers of the Golden Dream, one of my favorite stories that she did. Let's see. So let's just quickly go through it. I've done it here by color on the length, and you can see already how they vary. We'll touch on that purple one there in a minute, which tends to go on for a while. But let's just go through it. This is a story about love and death in the Golden Land, and begins with the country. The San Bernardino Valley lies only an hour east of Los Angeles by the San Bernardino Freeway, but is in certain ways an alien place. Not the coastal California of the subtropical twilights and the soft westerlies off the Pacific, but a harsher California, haunted by the Mojave just beyond the mountains, devastated by the hot, dry Santa Ana wind that comes through the passes at 100 miles an hour and winds through the eucalyptus windbreaks and works on the nerves. October is the bad month for the wind, the month when breathing is difficult and the hills blaze up spontaneously. There has been no rain since April. Every voice seems a scream. It is the season of suicide and divorce and prickly dread whenever the wind blows. Boy, that sets things up very, very well. But when you encounter something like this, and this certainly turned my head, years ago when I first read it, and I've come back to it obviously over the years, you need to break it down. You need to diagram it out. How is this working, and what is potentially the techniques employed here that you could use too? So let's go through it line by line. We have six sentences in total. Only two are really of similar length. You could make an argument for two others, but I think that's a little bit of a reach. Most importantly for our discussion, the lines work together and they balance each other, and they also build, and they keep the reader interested, resulting in a memorable passage. Let's look at the first line. And this is breaking some rules, but sometimes that's fine to break rules, but it's good to know what rules you're breaking and the pluses and minuses of them. This is the story. That's potentially passive. If you use is as a verb too much, I think it really makes your work a little predictable and a little bit boring. But this is a story about love and death in the Golden Land, and begins with the country. Now, one of the things that Didion does very well, part of her style, and one of the things you guys should be considering as you move ahead with your piece, is what's your style. Style is really the choices you're making in sense of words and sentences. One of the things with Didion styles is this extra and. It really kind of brings out, it adds a beat, as they say in film lingo. It adds as a pause. It emphasizes certain things you want to emphasize. Now, going back to the is, again, too much of that is passive construction, and it can lead the readers to be somewhat skeptical. Who says? What's the source? Etc. So I think you can get away with is somewhat, but at some point you've got to be, I think, using other verbs and certainly considering your sourcing too. Second line. All right, here's that long sentence, and I would not recommend doing this much at all, but there's a method to the madness here, and I think it's good to kind of bear it out. If you think about California, it's like one of those places we come to with a kind of stereotypical outlook on it. I'm thinking the beaches, I'm thinking Hollywood, I'm thinking maybe San Francisco Bay. But she, in this piece, is going to be dealing more with the California, more inland, more in the valley, more where some really interesting things are taking place. And what this sentence does is really take you from your preconceived notions of what California is and takes you, in a sense, to another part of California. And it's a long sentence. We've got some repetition here with San Bernardino Valley, San Bernardino Freeway. Again, I'm not big on repetition, but here it's kind of centering us on exactly where we are. We're in SoCal, we're in Southern California. But very soon she's emphasizing we're not in the coastal California of the subtropical twilights and soft westerlies, etc. We're going to be in a harsher California, haunted by the Mojave, devastated by the hot, dry Santa Ana winds, passes and winds and nerves, notice how, in a sense, the word choice has changed. Soft consonants, like we have with ways, subtropical twilights, soft westerlies, here what's in green, can put a reader, allow them to settle in. It makes them comfortable in the piece. Okay, that sounds great. Why don't I do that all the time? Because if you do it too much, you bore them to death. At times, you got to wake them up. Hard consonants, like the H's and the D's, hot, dry, even P's, winds, nerves, which are in red here, they put the reader on edge. They get them alert. Okay, something's happening. Look out, here it comes. And again, sounds great. Sounds like a profitable thing to do. Why don't I do this all the time? Because if you do hard consonants too much, you wear the reader out. They're on edge too much so by the time they reach the end of their piece, even if they do so. So often we've talked a little bit about the toggle, the back and forth. We talked about that last week in the Zoom with scene and summary. You can do the same thing here with hard and soft consonants, and you don't necessarily have to start with soft and go to hard. You can start with hard and go to soft, or go soft to hard to soft, whatever it may be. But make sure, again, there's a method to your madness. The method to the madness here is Didion is intent on taking you from what you think California is, or what you are bringing to the table, and she's taking you someplace else. And she's doing that with her word choice on this very long sentence. Okay, after a long sentence, even one that's measurably shorter than that, you've got to break things up. You can't do another long sentence because, in a sense, the reader is going to lose interest in my mind. So we're back to kind of this borderline declarative sentence. It's a bit long, but certainly not long compared to what just came before it. We have October is. Now this is something Didion does. She does something is. Denta is. Okay, again, I'm wary of it, but the thing is, it's part of her style. And it augments now what just came before. Before we had this very long sentence, which was very descriptive. Now this is more of a tell. Oh, it's a bad month for the wind. Oh, breathing's difficult. Now the hills are blazing up. It augments very nicely to what just came before. Fourth sentence, shorter yet. There's been no rain since April. This is a straight tell. There is really no description or even ornamentation here. It's a tell. And if any reader who's certainly gotten this far, and most have, hasn't been any rain since April, that's bad news. That means the hills are blazing up. And it's funny, when I go through this, I still remember reading it for the first time years ago, I always loved this line. You could almost end with this. This is a nice spike because it allows the reader to be a participant. They're going to come to a conclusion, this is trouble. There's been no rain since April. But she's going to add some more. Perhaps her most memorable quoted line, every voice seems a scream. If you look up Joan Didion, you're going to find this all over the place. This, in a sense, is more opinion than what just came before with the tell, the fourth line, but it augments it. It spikes it again. It backs up the previous material. I don't think you could roll out this line without certainly the lines before, certainly not line 1 or line 4, sentence 1 or sentence 4. But the thing is, after it's following those, okay, I'm buying in. It gives it a nice spike. And it kind of plays off very nicely. Also notice what the sequencing's been. Kind of long, longish, short, short. I don't think you could put another long sentence here. It would just break up the cadence and the pattern, the rhythm too much. It would be too much for the reader. So another short one, especially something that's more almost opinion-like, brings it home. Okay, again, you could have ended it with here. Every voice seems to scream. Ooh, that's a nice spike. But Didion's going to give us a little bit more. And she almost in one paragraph brings things back together to the way we started. We've got another kind of it is construction, which augments that first sentence in the paragraph. But notice how things have been added a little bit more. Not only is this an echo of the opening line, it's a little bit more. And you have to give the reader a little bit more as they go ahead through things. It is the season of suicide and divorce and prickly dread. whenever the wind blows. Ooh, yikes. But there's a couple things going on here. Look at that second and. It's this season of suicide and divorce and prickly dread. Usually when we do listing, it's red, white, and blue. It's not red and white and blue. But here she's putting in an extra and, again, to tease things out. There's a technique. You can use it. Do you want to or not? Make a decision. But there's a technique that you can use with no strings attached. The other thing that's intriguing here is Didion is often walking in the footsteps of Hemingway and that crowd, which use very few modifiers, adjectives, adverbs, etc. But here we've got prickly dread. So she very rarely uses them, a modifier like that, but when she does, it's got a payoff. So she fits it in there and augments it with that extra and. The season of suicide and divorce and prickly dread. Whew, man, that sits right in the memory banks very, very well. So to review, diagramming it out. This is what you do when something turns your head, at least in my opinion, something that you've read. You do you kind of put it all down. How did this play out? And this is just one paragraph, gang. Sentence 1, it's medium in length, reads well, holds our attention. There's a nice little hook. Sentence 2, you could argue it's too long, but it is taking us from one preconceived notion of this land, California, to another that's arguably more dangerous and unknown, which definitely plays out in the story. Sentence 3, medium to long, it kind of grounds us certainly after that long sentence. And we have next the bracketed sentences 4 and 5, which are short and sweet, but they're different. One is short, number 4, sentence 4, short and informative. There's been no rain. But the 5th is every voice seems a scream. That's not only memorable, as she's kind of sliding in a bit of her opinion about it. And I think it fits because it's been set up pretty well. And then the final sentence, it is the season, which echoes now the first line and the final note in the piece. So you have just one paragraph, but you can see how detailed and how varied the sentences are. I think we tend to write all of us sentences of a particular length. I think it's part of our writing DNA. This is something you look at when you go back through revision and you start to maybe change and vary the sentence length to, again, keep the reader engaged. For example, I tend to write kind of medium to longish sentences, except if I'm really tired or I'm up, whatever, or I'm frustrated, impatient, then I'll write short ones. I know this, so when I go back in revision, I know I've got to vary things to a certain degree. Again, it's all about keeping the reader engaged. You can be writing the most interesting, intricate, groundbreaking stuff, but if all the sentences are roughly the same, I don't think it's going to carry the day. So let me know if you have any questions, but that's varying sentence length, which I think is hugely important. Thanks for listening.